Just past the ranch, there's an old post office there, there's a couple of houses. That was a town that was invented by the railroad about 100 years ago. It's called Greenland. It's because it looks like Greenland. See what I mean?
Yeah.
And Douglas County bought that property.
When Douglas County established its open space program, the South I-25 corridor, as we call it, was one of the highest of all the priority areas within the county. The J.A. Ranch and some of the others were very important as well, but Greenland was identified as being a real key one because of its size, because of its location on both sides of I-25. It's a buffer from El Paso County, where a lot of the development was coming right up to the county line. As you're driving south on I-25 and you pass the Larkspur exit and you come up over the hill where the rest stop is, then you come into a big long valley that is just wide open, and eventually you do see the Greenland turnoff. The red barn is the landmark of the Greenland homestead. This is a picture of the Greenland Ranch headquarters. It's taken looking west, and the perspective is from where I-25 is today. The old barn that's in the far background on the left is the one that was built in 1877. It was struck by lightning and burned down in 1922 and rebuilt. And the one that's there today that's quite a landmark is the big red barn. The Greenland Ranch was one of those very important properties long before the existence of the open space program. In fact, Governor Romer, when he was in a state position before he was elected governor, had identified it as something that was really critical for the state to preserve. Wildlife, ranching, history, the railroad, lots of reasons. In 1859, they established a stage stop and a saloon at the Greenland area, and they called it Pinedale at that point in time. And then around 1871, the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad started stopping there, and it became a real hub for shipping of livestock, lumber, potatoes. Helen Hunt Jackson, who was a renowned author at the time, was so impressed with the area, she wrote a lot about it and inspired the name of Greenland, and they actually changed the name a few years later. Another theory on how Greenland got its name is that the weather in the winter there is so cold that it's very similar to the northern island of Greenland. About 1875, they platted the Greenland Townsite prior to Colorado becoming a state. And there were about 134 very small lots in the townsite on 20 acres, so you can imagine the size of those lots. They were very, very tiny. That area became a destination for arrival and departure for people going to the Perry Park Ranch. Isaac Noe also moved in and homesteaded in the area, and the Noe family still lives in the Larkspur, Greenland area.
My husband's grandfather, I.J. Noe, assembled pretty much the land. He lived in Greenland, and my father-in-law was born in Greenland. And attended the Greenland School. And he lived in the Greenland Ranch until he was about 7 years old.
The 1880s saw the area really develop greatly as cattle ranching. And about that time, the late 1800s, early 1900s, the Higbee family moved in as merchants originally, and they eventually bought out the entire Greenland Ranch holdings. And at that time, it was about 11,000 acres.
People brought cattle in there, and I think many cases they put them in the corrals there at the ranch, kind of as a holding pen until the trains were about time to come.
Some of the other key ranch names in the area were Alice, Riggs, and Taylor.
Greenland was a thriving town. Had a couple grocery stores and big school. The house is still standing, just that they lived in, just east of the barn on the Higbee place.
We actually ended up purchasing a lot of the Greenland Townsite vacant lots from the Taylor family, and Milton Taylor gave us a lot of really good information and insight from growing up in the Greenland Townsite.
My mother was a postmaster for 26 years, My dad and my uncle run a garage that was adjacent to the north of the house. My granddad was a blacksmith there. My great-granddad owned the land that they bought it from, John Gray. They had a bar there. And the main highway went from Denver to Colorado Springs, right past the filling station.
1927 is when the highway was moved, the primary highway down to Palmer Lake. It moved west and became what today is 105. And at that point, the Greenland area began a decline. A lot of the businesses just disappeared. The school closed in 1957, and the post office closed in 1959. When Douglas County bought the town site, we actually acquired the old post office building. So we've had a complete historic analysis done of it as to what it looked like and how we would go back and restore it to look like it did back then.
My dad picked up the mail over there. They had a mail sack that was made out of canvas with a ring in each end. They hung on a crane, and a train would come through, and an arm would stick out and hook the sack, jerk it off of there, and they would kick the mail out in another sack.
I do remember getting a mail a time or two that was kind of chewed up a little bit. Evidently, they didn't throw the bag far enough, or the wind caught it and caught the mail. Mrs. Taylor was the postmistress when I first remember going there. And usually, they knew what time the mail train was coming in, and it'd take Mrs. Taylor about so long to sort out the mail. And so there'd be a congregation of people there.
The Lorraines and the Noes and the Higbees and the mom all come in met at the store at the same time because they had to meet this train at a certain time. Then the bull session was on.
The No family is still in the area. I believe the Higbees are still in the monument area, and some of the Alices are still around. So there's a number of them that are in the area. Probably the most historic building is the old red barn that's actually on the Greenland property.
They used to have their Higbee reunion when it was the Greenland Land and Cattle Company. Why, they always had their big picnic and then a dance there at night. And Mom played there. She played the piano.
This is the Christensen Ranch that originally was part of the old Alice family ranch, and it has been preserved with a conservation easement to keep it in agricultural uses. And the Christensens live there and run their cattle and maintain the ranch. This is the No Ranch. They are one of the original homesteaders. It was called the Eagle Mountain Ranch, and the holdings used to be considerably larger.
The No family farm celebrated their centennial in 1990. We found the deed I did in the courthouse in 1890 when my father-in-law bought the first 200 acres here. They acquired more. Grandpa I.J. was quite a wheeler and dealer in agricultural land. He put together many of the ranches around.
The No family still lives in the area in the same house. It hasn't changed at all over all these years. When Douglas County acquired the Greenland Townsite, we spent quite a bit of time with Milton Taylor, who grew up there, and he told us a number of really fun stories, one of which was when he was a young child, he and his brothers and sisters would walk down the railroad track to where the curves were.
When the trains would come around that corner south up there, coal would slide off, and we picked up the coal off of the railroad.
And that's what they used to heat their house.
I was probably, I'm going to say 10 years old in that vicinity, and there was an awful big snow came through. It blocked the roads.
There was a train stuck between Greenland and Palmer Lake there, and it was right close to some of Higbee's cattle, and it couldn't go. So they got a hold of Higbee's and asked them if they could, the cooks on the It was a passenger train. It was loaded with people. If they would let them butcher a cow to feed the people on the train, and Higbee said, yes, go ahead and take one.
I grew up with cattle and horses. I grew up breaking horses. My granddad raised work horses, and we broke work horses.
The first building to get electricity in Greenland was the schoolhouse. They were having a Halloween program at the schoolhouse, and they did everything they could to get lights into the schoolhouse so that they'd have lights for the Halloween program.
Higbee's allowed the Indians, when they was going back and forth, to stop there and stay as long as they wanted to. And of course they loved the railroads. The Indians loved railroads because of the power and what magnificent they was. So they'd go up to the depot and watch Daddy as the trains come in and load the milk and whatever they had to unload and everything like that. And they loved to just get in that depot, and Daddy allowed it. He allowed it.
We would ice skate and sled and stuff like that. And east of Greenland, that creek that comes there used to spread out, and we could skate for miles and miles on that creek. And we would get a big blanket and hold it up for a sail, and we would go from forever down through there.
You can see I-25 right here. That's the major transportation corridor in the western United States. Runs right through this property, right through Douglas County. It connects Douglas County down into Colorado Springs and up into Denver. Wouldn't it be neat if you get to a point where you don't look at buildings and houses and office buildings, industrial facilities? That's one of the ideas behind this project area, is to give the traveler a break, so that as you travel through this open area, you get a chance to kind of know what the West used to look like before some of these big towns grew up. But there's a lot more to it than that.
One of my goals with the Open Space program is to find ways to preserve our Western heritage. I think it's very important to do that before it's lost. And the Greenland Ranch area is very significant because it was historically a cattle ranching area. It's remaining in cattle ranching today, and I'd like to see it continue on in the future under cattle ranching and agriculture and protecting the wildlife, so that people will remember where we came from.
They sure named it right when they called it Greenland, because that is the greenest place even now.